Hello everybody. This video is going to be something a little different. At the start of this month, July 2023, my Energica EVA Ribelle was booked in for a replacement immobiliser and ignition unit with English Electric Motor Company in Redgrave near Diss. Rather than just go down and return on the same day, as I have done in the past, my old friend and regular motorcycle touring companion Chris and I booked in for a couple of nights at a bed and breakfast not too far away from EEMC and took the opportunity, while my bike was being worked on, to take out the Energica Experia and the Zero DSR X for a test ride. I've done previous videos on each of these bikes, but having accompanied me on motorcycle trips where I've ridden electric, Chris is familiar with what's involved and is now seriously looking at getting an electric motorcycle as a second bike alongside his Honda Africa Twin. Following on from the test ride, I thought it would make a great video for us to have a conversation on what his thoughts were, having now ridden both of them. And so this video takes the form of that recorded conversation, alongside footage of our ride on the bikes, with both of us riding each bike in turn. But first of all, take a look at our rustic accommodation and the room I slept in.
You said he was going to London, didn't they?
Oh, I don't know.
Fridge.
Oh, okay. Ugh, rickety stairs. Rickety staircase. Ugh. Safety first with this handrail. It's barely in the wall. Nope. Look at that. Servants' quarters. And a funky little window through to here. Oh, look at that. And a blind.
Like I say, very rustic. But enough about that, let's get on to talking about and looking at the bikes. And first of all, an introduction.
So, my name's Chris, and I've been doing trips with John for years. Had lots of bikes and used to swap them quite regularly, but kind of settling down with a couple that I like now. I moved from the Midlands to South Wales almost 2 years ago. So I guess the reason we were doing this trip was that I'm looking at possibly buying an electric bike. So what I'm looking for is something for the little rides out on the Sunday, perhaps 60-70 miles. And electric bikes are fast and they're cheap to run once you bought them. So I currently ride an Africa Twin, one of the 1100s. And I thought they would be a good fit for me to swap over. So we went off and did a weekend at English Electric.
Yep. So you're not thinking about getting rid of your Africa Twin, are you? Let's put that out there. This is a second bike. It's not.
So I want the Africa Twin for longer journeys. I've done enough trips with you, John, to know that you need to charge an electric bike, and I have to go into patient mode when I tour with John, which means so I live not far from lots of really nice roads going up to Brecon, and what I actually want is a couple of hours out on the bike, a coffee, and a couple of hours back, and probably very rarely do 100 miles.
My concern for you was you might get the bike and then think, oh, actually, I might want to go a bit further afield. But as you've rightly said, you've got your Africa Twin for that. And indeed, for those who don't know, I still have my Honda CBF 1000, which I've had since 2007, and it's knocking on 100,000 miles. But it's been knocking on 100,000 miles for a while, which kind of tells you a lot maybe about the electric bike, which just hit 11,000 miles in 14 months. What Chris is saying is absolutely valid and absolutely fair in so far as when, and we've toured a lot together on petrol bikes and still will in future, But when we've done trips where it's feasible for me to do it sensibly without annoying the hell out of Chris too much, I've done it on the Energica EVA Ribelle, and he very graciously has been patient, as he said. You know, it's there's no getting around it. Sometimes you have to stop and charge. I guess the obvious questions a lot of people would ask about electric motorbikes, or concerns people would have, are: do you miss the sound? So how do you feel about that?
Well, I guess we're going to go into sound a bit later on. But the short answer is no. It's I don't. I think, and I've ridden both your bikes, and the short answer is no. You don't miss the sound. It's actually quite pleasant to kind of float along the road and not have the sound. So, you know, for the bikers out there, one of the great things about riding a motorbike is that you're in the environment, so you smell things and you see things that you just don't in a car, and I think that's even more so true for a quiet electric bike, because suddenly you can hear things that you didn't before.
I think you hit on something there where I really remember the impression I got first riding electric was just slowing down up to a junction, and you could hear birds twittering. And you can also hear, importantly, safety-wise, you can also hear vehicles around blind bends, which is, you know, coming back to the loud pipe save live thing.
So does being able to hear what's around you. Yeah. I think that's a non-issue. You're asking a question. Do I miss it? Not really.
Coming on to something else that's different that you might miss. What about gears? Not having gears. How did you find that?
I do miss it, but actually, you very quickly get used to it. It's like one of those things that. So I drive a Mercedes car, automatic. I will never buy a car ever again with gears. And my wife's car's got gears, and when I'm it's a little car, and when I'm driving it, I just think, what a pain in the backside this is. So the way I describe it is, it's like driving an automatic car. Once you've done it and once you get used to it, it just becomes not an issue. But there is that initial slight learning curve, and actually on this weekend there was times where I went for the clutch and was like, where's the clutch? There's no clutch. And then you realise what you're doing.
We know how to slow ride. Both of us know how to slow ride, and very controlled slow riding with, you know, back brake and feathering clutch. And when you go from a standard petrol motorbike to an electric, there is a bit of a thing you have to do with muscle memory to realise that you haven't got that clutch there to feather. So it now all is back brake and throttle. And I remember having exactly the same problem. In fact, I had to go out on car parks and practice slow riding again with electric to get used to it. So yeah, no, there's no shame in that at all. It's just a mental shift. So the two bikes we looked at the Zero DSR and the Energica Experia. So the Zero is officially branded as an adventure bike. The Experia is officially branded as a sports tourer. But they seem to both be attracting the same kind of interest in terms of buyer. First of all, do you think they're overpriced?
Look, they are all overpriced. I'm not going to say anything other than I got a quote from English Electric, and the you're talking mid-20s. The bike that you can get for that is just, phenomenal. I got my last bike before the Africa Twin was a brand new GSA, basically the one that everyone buys, the one that's got everything, and it wasn't that much. And that's kind of like, the pinnacle of adventure bikes. So they are overly priced. I think that the Zero actually surprised me a little bit, because I forgive me, but I can't remember his name. He'd just done one of the Sweet Lamb events on it, and it had TKC 80s on it.
Nathan.
And Nathan, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I looked around the bike, and you know what? It actually held up fairly well. It did hold up well, but I don't really think they're that well suited. And I think what Energica do that's different is that they're not going for the T7 market or the Africa Twin market or the KTM 890R. What they're saying is we're an electric Ducati. We're a multistrada, not the enduro. We're a performance bike, and we're a performance machine. So I think actually Energica are a little bit more truthful. Anyone who rides off road knows that, you know, dropping one of these big heavy bikes very quickly becomes expensive. And the Energica is more truthful. I think it's a Pikes Peak electric Ducati. That's what it is. It's not pretending to be anything else. For people who are a bit older and they don't want to be crouched up on a sports bike and they want nice room for your legs to stretch, and both these bikes are amazing.
The Zero DSR is, I mean, I rode it over railway sleepers at quite some rate. Obviously, the suspension travel is set up. It's all set up to do some quite heavyish off-road stuff. But I understand what you're saying. I think it would probably be good for. It probably would be good for something like Mark's Travels is doing at the moment.
It's more much suited, better bike than what he's got.
More suited than what he's got. It would be much better suited. It would have been much better suited for the long way up if it had been available at the time than what they took. Much better.
Yeah. You put some 50/50 tyres on, and it would be. And actually, okay, that's actually what it is. It's an adventure in the truest sense of adventure.
Yeah.
It's not a weekend away off-road bike.
No.
That's actually correct. It is I've got to go up this road because that's where the Garmin sat-nav takes me, and I'm in the middle of Africa and I have no idea where else to go, so I'm going this way, and it will handle that road. Yeah,
I think you're right. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties in with the kind of stuff I was riding in October as well. It wasn't steep, 45-degree.
Yeah. Whereas the Energica, you would just look at it and go, I won't have any bike left at the end of that. It's just, you know, the suspension's not compliant enough. It's stiff. It's, you know, you want to stick to nice roads on it.
So the Zero DSR had AC charging fitted, and the Energica Experia has the DC CCS. So we're looking roughly under an hour to charge the Experia. Probably less than that. Obviously, it always depends how empty it is, and you don't generally turn up somewhere with 0%. Not normally. So probably average stop is 40 minutes in my experience, thereabouts. That's what we did when we went down last weekend. We did 40 minutes of that McDonald's when I was charging it.
Right.
And that's pretty typical, I think. So on that basis, then we look at the Zero, and it's AC charging, and you're looking at, for the DSRX, another look, it's 17 kilowatt hour battery. So it's a bit bigger than the Zero DSR I used to have. So obviously you've got a bit more range. It's a heavier bike, but you've got a 2-hour charge instead of a sub 1 hour charge.
Remember as well, one thing I noticed is that the Zero had less range than the Energica. Look, I wasn't ragging the Energica, but when we stopped halfway, the Energica had handled the mileage with more charge at the end. So, and I think it was a good 20-30 miles. It was a fair bit, to be honest.
That brings us on to now the kind of riding you're talking about doing. You might not even ever charge out of your house.
Yeah.
Actually.
And if I do, it'll be 20-30 miles worth. So it'll be, you know, I'm stopping, so I may as well, you know, if it's sitting, it should be charging. Isn't that as one of your electric people say?
ABC, always be charging.
Always be charging. There you go.
Yeah, if you stop somewhere, just
charge.
Find somewhere where you can charge.
So I think, I probably would never have to charge, or that's my plan. But I think you can't help yourself. You would stop where there's a charger, because why wouldn't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it. But on the basis of what you talked about doing, let's say, for instance, you were headed from yours to Aberystwyth seafront for a day out. I mean, you could. What's that sort of distance from yours? I don't know off the top of my head.
95 miles.
So it's 95 miles there and 95 back.
Yeah.
So you could go there, plug it in, do something for an hour and a half, a couple of hours, and come back. Pretty comfortably, I think, on that basis.
Yeah.
So
You put it on charge. You go have some food. You walk around.
the one thing that's worth saying about AC chargers is, although it is fundamentally slower, there are a lot more of them around because they're much cheaper to install. So you tend to find them in more places. And they also tend to be cheaper as well to charge for. So I think that's worth saying. What surprised you on each of the bikes? Let's go with the Energica first, the Experia.
English Electric were very clear that this is a pre-production model, and it just had some things in it that were not quite to spec. So the suspension linkage was laser cut, and you could still see the rake of the laser. It hadn't been machined. There was things on it that weren't quite up to par. However, even with that, it was still a very well spec'd, well built motorbike. It just felt solid. It felt like it was a step above most motorbikes. If you just closed your eyes and sat on it, you would still know you were on a premium bike. It was just like, the mirrors were great, and just the little things, and no squeaks, no rattles, no anything. Just really, really good quality bike. Also, the seat height was fairly low, and the seat was a premium, comfortable seat. I don't know what the pillion seat is, because it still had like the box where the police put all their
It's the 12-volt battery, 12-volt connections, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a computer to do some of the lights and things like that, the flashing lights.
Yeah.
But it felt like you would expect that type of bike to feel. Really great quality. The TFT screen was great. It did feel a little heavy. It's not a light bike, but it's not any heavier than say a GSA is when you're pushing it around. In fact, it wasn't as heavy as a GSA.
A couple of things you said I think are worth mentioning. The first, because one of them struck me as quite strange. We were commed up, just to explain, we were commed up all the way, so we were talking to each other about the bikes as we rode along. And I don't know if you remember, pretty much the first thing you said riding it was,
"This is lovely," probably, because
it was. You said, "I think this is more comfortable than my Africa Twin."
Yeah, it is.
Your exact words.
Yeah, it's supremely comfortable. Yeah, all these bikes are comfortable, but it was as comfortable as anything I've ever ridden.
But I would echo what the other thing you were just saying about the steering. I definitely echo that. Insofar as you definitely really need to make use of counter steering.
It's not a bike that wants to just drop into corners. It kind of moves and then stops. So if you just put a bit of lean on yourself, it moves a little bit and then it doesn't continue. And it does require some positive steering. You need to tell it where to go. The one good thing about that is that once you tell it, right, you want to be there, it stays very planted and very online.
There is a bit more weight up top on that compared to the other newer Energica models.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah, and it's not. The older model Energicas were far more, in my memory, quite a bit more top heavy than the newer ones. That was somewhere between, but it was it felt manageable with a bit of, like you say, some positive steering. You could really You could really wield it.
Yeah.
Where you could really tell it where to go.
And I think I'm used to riding something that is quite flickable. I do carry stuff on my bike, but anything heavy, I put two Krieger bags on my engine bars at the front, so they're right down. So all the weight is kind of like where the 890 tank is. So my bike is quite flickable and it is quite easy to ride. And I guess coming onto that, there was a difference. Is it a major thing? No, I don't think it is, but it was just a little bit. It just required you to put a bit of effort into to get the bike moving. But as a road bike, just fantastic. It was amazing. The only real negative, if you take cost out of it, right? Let's be honest. These bikes are super expensive. That's a huge negative for 90% of the population. The Energica made quite a lot a loud whining noise, and English Electric afterwards looked at the bike and they said there no oil in the, where was it, the gearbox or something, or and that's why. But it was making a racket, so much so it put me off the bike. Now I know that's weird, and I know you said, ha ha ha, someone's moaning that an electric bike's too loud.
It did make me laugh because it's ironic.
Yeah. Right, but it was quite a high pitched whine, and it was constant. And for a few minutes it was fine, and for 15 minutes it was fine. But when I'd been on the bike for an hour, I was kind of like, okay, I've had enough of that. It was so loud. I'm jumping ahead now, but it was so loud. It was all I could hear when I was riding the DSR and you were riding the. And I deliberately let you go ahead, like 50 meters, so that I didn't have to hear it anymore.
It was kicking through the intercom when you were riding it. I could hear it through the intercom. It was triggering the noise gate on the microphone so that I could hear it.
If you take that away from the Energica, it's the perfect bike for me. The charging, I don't think for my use is neither here nor there.
No.
The price is neither here nor there because there's deals to be had, and I think if I said what I want is a quick bike that is going to handle really well, going to be great in the twisties. Once I buy it, it's going to be cheap to run. It's going to be fun to ride. It's supremely comfortable. I can get proper tyres because it's a 17-inch tyre, so all the the sticky rubber that you can buy. I'm only going to do 4,000 miles a year on this bike, as opposed to my 10 I do on my Africa Twin. So I can afford sticky rubber for it. So it is, without doubt, if you wrote it down on paper, the perfect bike for what I want. It's sublime, If the noise was so loud, I wouldn't buy one without riding one again and not having that noise. Yeah. Because so you said, what do you get out of having an electric bike? Well, you get that extra sense. You get your hearing, but not with that Energica. You don't. It was as loud as certainly some combustion engine bikes I've ridden.
I think it's a different frequency, so it's not as obviously not low end frequency, it's high end. It's for those who haven't heard it or can't pick it up on the video, I'm sure you can. It's a high pitched whine like a jet sound. It does sound quite futuristic. I always hark back to the first time I heard an Energica in the wild, and it was my mate James riding a demo one, and I could hear him a mile away, and I'm not even exaggerating. It was over a mile away. I could hear him, and I thought it was a jet or something. So yeah, they're not quiet.
But your Energica, I rode on the night, if you remember, and it was not an issue.
No,
it's not an issue at all. It was like, it's there, and actually, it adds to the experience. I'm not saying it doesn't.
No,
but
it's
this
quite
one,
nice.
whether it was pre-production, whether it was low on fuel, on oil, I don't know, and I don't really care. I'll go back to putting it down on paper. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Apart from the noise,
So
and I wouldn't buy one. after hearing that noise. I'd have to ride one that didn't make that noise.
Yeah. So I just to expand on that, I did put a message out on the Facebook owners group about that noise and asked the question, because we were pondering it. We were talking about it and saying, is it a pre-production thing? Alec wasn't sure at English Electric whether it was a pre-production thing. Thought it might be, but I put the question out and asked owners who'd had previous Energica bikes and who'd bought the Experia, obviously a market-ready one, what their experience with the Experia was, and quite strongly the answer came back that the one that stuck out was no, it was quieter than my old bike. So clearly something wasn't right with the one that we had in terms of the noise level. But as you say, if Alex come back and said, actually, we found out there was very little oil,
and he did, and that meant that I didn't strike it off my list. Him saying that basically said, right, I need to readdress it. I need to look at it again.
Yeah.
But not with a pre-production. So the DSRX.
Yeah. That's what I was going to come to that.
That's the total opposite. It was. I got on it and it was quiet.
Yeah.
All I could hear was was the Energica up front.
Yeah.
It was quiet. It was. It felt smooth. It felt. The only way I could almost describe it is it was like the difference that you have between, say, a parallel or a V-twin to going on into a 4. Well, the Zero's like going into a V8 or something. I don't even know. It was so smooth. There was no noise, no rattle, and bearing in mind it's got TKC 80s on it, and it just dipped into corners really easy. It was really flickable. I got on it and I'll be honest, I rode one before and it rattled a little bit, and the build quality on the Zero isn't as good as the Energica. It feels like a mid-level bike. It feels like a Suzuki or a Kawasaki, and that's me not having a go at Suzuki or Kawasaki, but they are what they are. They're a reasonable price. They're not a £30,000 motorbike, and it felt like that. However, riding it, I was kind of instantly at home. It was almost as quick as the Energica. It was silent, and it was a lot more flickable. What it actually made me do is to say, right, the Energica is the perfect bike for me if I put it down on paper. But actually, I kind of like the Zero more.
Yeah.
And you know that. Do you remember when you were buying your bike and I was saying, John, that's a lot of money, and sometimes you've just got to buy it with your heart, and you've got to go, right, that's the one I want, and I can't justify it to anyone other than myself. That's the one I want. So I come off that bike thinking, wow, that was just such a really nice experience, and it was an eye-opener. It was easy to ride. It was quick. It's a little higher, I think, so perhaps that made a difference. Where well, mind you, it's probably only a couple of inches, so that probably didn't make a difference. But it was, again, put some 80/20 tires on it, and it would be just fabulous. It was great on a 50/50 TKC 80. If you put something on it like a Scorpion Rally or one of the new Dunlop tires or a Metzler, it would just be sublime. You could just do miles and miles and miles on it. It was lovely.
Yeah.
The total opposite of the Energica. It wasn't as tight. It wasn't as well built. It wasn't as premium. But it rode really nicely. Yeah, really, really nicely.
An important difference is the Energica is built to order, and Zero bikes are not.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm saying that, and hand on heart, I think if I was going to buy one, it would be the Zero.
Yeah.
Which is, which is the ultimate compliment, isn't it? It's.
I get that.
Yeah.
I absolutely get that. In your use case,
The
I think it's
charge
probably
doesn't
the
make
right.
much difference.
No, no.
No.
And I think the only thing there is when you start looking at the extras on it, which you are probably not interested in, given again what you're planning to do with it. You're not going to need a 12 kilowatt charge setup on it, because okay, yeah, you can charge an hour instead of 2 hours, but is that as big a deal for you as
No, I don't.
saving that money?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, look, I bought the Africa Twin because I love Africa Twins. It's not the first one I've owned, and I love it. I love that bike, but it's not the quickest bike in the world. It's what, 100 horsepower. It's perfectly adequate, and that's the right way to say it. It's perfectly adequate. But when you ride these electric bikes, they're not adequate. It's 1000cc sports bike fast in an upright tourer that, if you charge at home, you can zip around for 100 miles on a Sunday afternoon, and it costs you next to nothing. And you don't have to go to the petrol station, and you don't have to, if you're doing 100 miles, then you go out, you have a cup of coffee, you sit on a bench in the sun or something, and then you come back. And for me, that's the beauty of them. That's what they should be selling. It should be all these people who buy a bike and do 2,000 miles a year. They should have an electric bike, because it would cost them so much less to run. Servicing is like almost free. They make sense as a toy.
So I looked into this the other day. I wanted to establish exactly what the annual average mileage was for UK riders, at least. And would you care to guess what it is?
3,000 miles.
You're spot on, actually. And I've done 11,000 in just over a year on an electric bike. So.
But you've spent a lot of time sitting at a charge point.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Because most of the time I've done exactly what you just said.
No.
I've gone out, I've done a ride, come home, and that's 90% of my use case. You've seen me sit at charge points because of the nature of the journeys we've done.
Yeah. They're not cut out for touring unless you are dedicated. That's my opinion.
I think.
And I've done more. I've done touring with you, and you've done more than most. So
yeah,
it's. But I'll go back. They're fun. All these people. If anyone's watching this and hasn't tried one, and they're a petrol head, I'm a petrol head. I've probably in the last 12, 13 years had more bikes than you will own in your lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, not you as in, but the listener. I've had a lot of petrol bikes, and they are fun. They're about as fun as any bike I've ever ridden.
I think you've had 15 petrol bikes. Well, I've had one. I think that's not inaccurate.
And yours hasn't blown up yet, so you never know. There might be some more.
The state has died a couple of times, but that's Honda CBF thousands.
They're fun, and that's what I want. I want a toy. I don't want a tourer. I like the fact that it's a little bit less. It's not a yobs bike. They're quiet. They're or certainly wind, but the DSRX is just, you go through a village and no one would even know you're going through.
I mean, there is a serious side to that, insofar as there are places now, the kind of places we've gone touring typically, where they're now banning motorbikes because locals, it's all very well you sticking a lovely loud pipe on your exhaust and getting off on it, but it really gets a bit tedious for somebody who lives in a village, say in a mountain somewhere.
Well, I live close to a road where there's lots of bikes, and I hear them all the time, and especially over a weekend, if it's sunny, it's like, wow, everyone's out. I rode the bikes I loved both of them. The Experia was, on paper, perfect for what I wanted, and I preferred the DSRX. Yeah, which is, I know it's weird. I can't say anything, but the thing I would say is I don't think either of these bikes is getting the kind of sales that they deserve. Tomorrow we're having a smart meter fitted, and I've left the guy a note saying, please ensure you don't do anything stopping me, because I've got 3 phase into my house. I'm buying a charger, so I'm having a smart meter fitted. If he does anything that's going to stop me having a quick charger, and not because I know the DSRX won't charge fast, or quick, but
it would do actually with the charge tank. You could do because you get 22 kilowatts at home. So
do you know what? I think I'd rather have the space. I think I don't think I'm going to need it. Is the short answer.
I'm sure you're not.
I come back on a Sunday afternoon. I'm probably not going to touch the bike for a week. You know?
Well, mine plugs into a domestic socket, and we've got a car charger in the garage, which I could plug into that, but I don't, because for exactly the reason you said. I've actually got a timer, a Wi-Fi timer on a socket, which comes on at between the off peak rate times, and it just switches it on. So it switches the charging cable on, and if the bike's plugged in, it's going to charge it, and that's how I do it.
The perfect bike is the Energica, but I prefer the DSRX.
If it weren't for the noise, would that be a different conclusion?
I don't think it would.
Right. Good. Okay.
I don't think it would. I think I can't justify it either. If you'd asked me to say, convince me. My daughter does debate at school. If you said let's do a debate, I don't think I could. I'd just go, you buy what you want. I like that one.
Yeah, I get that. And sometimes it goes, it's like you said, rationalising buying these things. I could rationalise the DSR I used to have.
I couldn't even convince myself.
On a financial basis. I couldn't with the Energica.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to say thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.